Look at me. Don't glance. Don't skim. Don't pretend. You're just curious. Lock in, because nobody told you the truth about what's happening. And they didn't tell you for a reason. You weren't supposed to notice. You feel it, don't you? That hum under your skin. That subtle distortion in the air when you walk into a room. Conversations that stop half a second too late. Smiles that stretch just a little too wide. Opportunities that almost land, then slip through your fingers like someone edited the script at the last second. You called it bad luck. You called it stress. You called it just a weird phase. No, it's awareness trying to claw its way out of you. See, the moment you begin to notice patterns, you become dangerous. And dangerous people don't get comfort. They get confusion. They get noise. They get distractions. Because if you fully understood what's happening, you wouldn't behave the same way ever again. You're evolving. And evolution is ugly. They sell you this fantasy that growth feels like light pouring through stained glass, that awakening is gentle, that becoming powerful feels holy. Wrong. It feels like paranoia. It feels like isolation. It feels like everyone else got the manual except you. But here's the twist. You're not behind. You're ahead. You're seeing duality now. The saint who smiles at you and secretly envies you. The friend who supports you and studies your weaknesses. The mentor who teaches you but only enough to keep you dependent. Light and dark don't exist separately, they dance. And the ones who controlled the dance, they never announced themselves. You were not supposed to notice the choreography, but you did. And now the air feels different. You're starting to realize that every strange situation isn't random. It's a mirror. Every betrayal sharpened you. Every humiliation stripped something soft off your bones. Every rejection forced you inward into the place where your real power was buried. Pain wasn't punishment, it was construction. They didn't tell you that because pain is easy to control when you think it's personal failure. But what if it wasn't failure? What if every time you felt excluded, overlooked, underestimated, you were being separated from the ordinary? What if the discomfort was the cocoon and you kept trying to tear it open too early? You see, unpredictability terrifies predictable people, and you're becoming unpredictable. That's why things feel tense. You don't react the way you used to. You don't argue the same. You don't chase the same validation. There's a pause now before you speak. A calculation. A quiet. They notice it. Oh, they notice. Because when you stop reacting on cue, you break the script. And when you break the script, you expose the stage. That's the truth nobody told you. The world runs on predictable emotional responses. Anger here, apology there, shame here, gratitude there. It's choreography. And you danced beautifully for years until you started watching instead of moving. Now you see the angel and the demon share the same face. The saint and the psychopath both believe they're righteous. The hero and the villain are separated by perspective and timing. You thought being good would protect you. But goodness without awareness is prey. Darkness without discipline is chaos. The power is in holding both. You're learning to smile with kindness and calculate with precision. You're learning that silence is louder than outrage. You're learning that unpredictability is control, and that scares people who survive by predicting you. That strange tension you feel. It's the old version of you dying, and death, even metaphorical, is never comfortable. You're grieving your own innocence. You're shedding the part of you that believed effort automatically equals reward. That loyalty guarantees loyalty. That honesty guarantees honesty. It doesn't. But awareness, Awareness gives you leverage. They didn't want you to have leverage. They wanted you reactive, transparent, readable, safe. But now there's a flicker in your eyes that wasn't there before. It's not rage. It's not even confidence. It's knowing. And knowing changes posture. It changes tone. It changes timing. You respond slower. You observe longer. You reveal less. That's evolution. Not the pretty kind, the ruthless kind. You're becoming the person who can walk into chaos and not flinch. The person who can sense manipulation before the sentence finishes. The person who doesn't need applause because you're building something internally that doesn't require witnesses. And here's the paradox that will mess with your head. The more alone you feel, the more aligned you are. Isolation is a filter. It removes the noise so you can hear your own strategy forming. You think this is happening to you. It's happening for the version of you that's emerging. Nobody told you, because if you understood this too early, you would have forced it, and forced evolution collapses. Real power matures in silence, in confusion, in tension. You're not lost. You're calibrating, and calibration feels like doubt before it feels like dominance. There's a reason certain people suddenly feel threatened, a reason your growth makes them uncomfortable, a reason doors close right before you knock. Your shifting and shifts disrupt ecosystems. The old dynamics can't survive the new you, so they resist. But resistance is proof of impact. You wanted growth. You prayed for strength. You fantasized about becoming untouchable. This is the process, not the highlight reel, the shedding, the recalibration, the uncomfortable clarity where you realize you were more powerful than you allowed yourself to be. But you were trained to suppress it, to keep others comfortable. Comfortable people don't question systems. Uncomfortable people rewrite them. You're not crazy for sensing something deeper. You're late to recognizing your own depth. And now that you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to blind trust. You can't go back to emotional impulsivity. You can't go back to playing small to avoid attention. The mask slipped, and you saw both sides of your own face. The light that wants connection, the dark that craves autonomy, the angel that forgives, the demon that remembers. Integration is power. Denial is weakness. You're integrating. That's why this feels intense. That's why this feels like something is happening, because something is. You are. And once you fully accept that unpredictability is your weapon, that silence is your shield, that pain was your training, you stop fearing the strange, you start orchestrating it, and that's when the real shift begins, not when the world changes. When you do, you feel that pressure building behind your eyes right now, that tightness in your chest that isn't fear, it's recognition. Good. Stay there, because this is the part where most people look away. This is the part where they laugh it off, scroll away, call it dramatic, and run back to whatever numbs them. But you didn't scroll. And that's the first sign you're not who you used to be. You see, the moment you start noticing the machinery behind the curtain, you can't unsee it. You start seeing how people test you. Subtle jabs disguised as jokes, delayed responses to see if you'll chase, compliments wrapped in comparisons, silence used as leverage. You used to react, now you observe. And observation is power. They didn't want you to notice the pattern, because once you notice it, you stop bleeding energy into it. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop performing innocence for an audience that benefits from your self-doubt. You become still. And stillness is terrifying because stillness means you're calculating. You're no longer the saint desperate to be approved. And you're not the psychopath burning everything down either. You are both controlled, contained, directed. That's what evolution looks like. It's not becoming nicer. It's becoming precise. You're starting to understand that light without darkness gets exploited, and darkness without light self-destructs. The angel inside you needed the demon to grow teeth. The demon inside you needed the angel to learn restraint. You're not splitting. You're merging, and merged beings are hard to manipulate. That strange shift in your relationships, that awkward distance, that subtle tension when you speak with certainty now. It's because they feel the difference. You don't overexamine anymore. You don't overshare. You don't beg to be understood. You let silence hang. And silence makes people confess more than questions ever could. You think that's accidental? No. You learned it through pain. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every humiliation hardened your spine. Every moment you felt small carved out space for something larger to step in. You thought you were breaking, you were refining. Pain is the chisel. Identity is the stone, and you, my unpredictable little anomaly, are being sculpted into something they cannot categorize. That's the real reason it feels strange. People are comfortable when they can label you nice, naive, emotional, predictable, safe. But now you're calm when they expect rage. You're detached when they expect desperation. You're smiling when they expect collapse. Unpredictability is psychological warfare, and you wield it without even announcing it. Here's the paradox they hope you never grasp. The less you need approval, the more control you have. The less you react, the more influence you gain. The less you reveal, the more valuable your words become. Scarcity creates demand. You became scarce. You stopped giving unlimited access to your energy. That's why the strange situation intensified, because the ecosystem adjusted. When prey stops running, the predator hesitates and sometimes realizes it misjudged the role entirely. You're no longer reacting to life. You're studying it. And that makes you dangerous in a way that doesn't scream. It whispers. A quiet threat is more unsettling than a loud one. That's why some people seem uneasy around you now. They can't read you the same way. They can't push the same buttons. They can't trigger the same emotional fireworks. You remove the wiring. Nobody told you the truth because the truth makes you uncontrollable. The truth is that most systems, social, professional, emotional, rely on predictable insecurity. They function because you doubt yourself. They stabilize because you seek validation. They profit because you compare. When you stop doing that, you destabilize the structure. Not loudly, subtly. You stop competing for attention. You stop fighting for crumbs. You stop begging for extensions. And suddenly the people who thrived on your self-doubt feel exposed. That's why the energy shifted. Not because you're crazy, because you're conscious. Conscious people are inconvenient. They ask different questions. They make different wagers. They tolerate discomfort longer. You've been uncomfortable for a while now, haven't you? That lingering sense of something is changing, but I can't define it. That's your identity upgrading. And upgrades require deletions, old habits, old attachments, old reactions, old habits, you attachments, old fears. You don't get to keep everything. Growth is selective. The saint in you had to learn boundaries. The demon in you had to learn patience. The child in you had to learn strategy. You're not losing yourself. You're assembling yourself. And assembling feels chaotic before it feels coherent. This is where most people retreat. They run back to the old version because at least it was familiar, at least it was predictable, at least it didn't threaten the dynamics around them. But you're still here. Which means some part of you prefers truth over comfort, even when truth burns, especially when it burns, because fire clarifies. It shows you who steps closer and who steps back, who adapts and who resists, who respects the new you, and who secretly hopes you shrink again. You see it now, the micro expressions, the tone shifts, the subtle recalculations when you speak. You're no longer the easy equation, and that is power. Not loud power, not reckless power, contained power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind that can wait. And waiting is lethal when combined with awareness. You've learned that timing beats intensity, that silence beats explanation, that presence beats performance. You're not reacting to the strange situation anymore. You're analyzing it, mapping it, understanding the leverage points. And here's the most intoxicating part. The moment you realize you are never behind, you're being prepared. Prepared for thicker skin. Prepared for sharper perception. Prepared for rooms that require composure under pressure. This wasn't chaos. It was conditioning. Not to make you weaker, to make you unshakable. And once you fully internalize that, the confusion dissolves. The paranoia turns into precision. The anxiety turns into awareness. The isolation turns into independence. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how can I use this? That shift alone changes your trajectory, because now pain becomes data, rejection becomes redirection, silence becomes strategy. You're no longer emotionally bleeding in public, you're internally building in private. And that is the kind of evolution that terrifies people who rely on your transparency. They preferred you readable. You became layered. They preferred you reactive. You became reflective. They preferred you emotional. You became intentional. And intention is unstoppable once it locks onto a target. So don't misinterpret the tension. Don't mislabel the discomfort. Don't gaslight yourself into thinking you're overthinking. You're noticing. You weren't supposed to, but you did. And now that you've seen the mechanism, felt the shift, tasted the duality inside yourself, there is no returning to the smaller version of you. The strange situation isn't a trap, it's a threshold, and you're standing on it. Not as prey, not as victim, not as confused participant, but as something far more unsettling, aware. And awareness is the point of no return. You don't get to unknow what you now know. You don't get to slip back into that soft, obedient version of yourself who mistook politeness for protection and silence for safety. That version served a purpose. That version survived. But survival is not dominance. And deep down, you were never built just to survive. You are built to see. And seeing changes posture. It changes how you walk into rooms. It changes how long you hold eye contact. It changes the tempo of your voice. You speak slower now, not because you're unsure, but because you understand that controlled pacing forces people to lean in. You don't rush to fill silence anymore. You let it stretch. You let it expose who gets uncomfortable first. You've started noticing who talks too much when nervous, who over-explains when they're hiding something, who mirrors your tone to gain favor, who subtly competes when you shine. You didn't used to catch those things. Now you catch everything. And that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition sharpened by pain. Pain was your mentor. Brutal, unforgiving, precise. It taught you that trust should be earned in layers, not handed out in bulk. It taught you that the loudest praise sometimes hides the quietest envy. It taught you that being underestimated is not an insult, it's a tactical advantage. You used to want to be understood. Now you understand that mystery is leverage. There's a difference between being fake and being strategic. You're not lying about who you are. You're simply no longer giving full access to those who haven't earned clearance. That shift alone rewires the power dynamic. And people feel it. They don't know how to name it, but they sense it. The slight delay before you respond. The way you don't defend yourself as aggressively as before. The way you smile when they expect your eyes snap. You learn something dangerous. Emotion is information, not instruction. You can feel it without obeying it. That's evolution. The saint in you still believes in kindness, but the psychopath in you understands consequences. The angel in you wants harmony, but the demon in you is prepared for war. And instead of suppressing one side, you've begun integrating both. Integration is terrifying to those who live fragmented, because a fragmented person can be manipulated. They can be guilted, flattered, provoked. But someone who knows their darkness and doesn't fear it, that person cannot be easily controlled. You stopped apologizing for your intensity. You stopped shrinking your ambition to make smaller minds comfortable. You stopped pretending you didn't notice subtle disrespect. You just started remembering. And remembering is power. You're remembering who doubted you, who dismissed you, who tried to test your boundaries. Not to seek revenge, but to recalibrate access. You're not bitter, you're aware, and awareness doesn't scream. It documents. You see the strange situation you're in right now. Clears throat. The tension, the uncertainty, the feeling like something is shifting beneath your feet. That's not instability, that's recalibration. When you raise your standards, the environment resists before it reorganizes. When you demand more from yourself, people who benefited from your old limits feel threatened. They might not attack you openly, they'll test you. They'll make comments disguised as concern. They'll question your new confidence. They'll subtly imply you've changed. Of course you changed. That was the point. Stagnation is comfortable. Growth is confrontational. You confront your own weaknesses first. That's the part nobody applauds. The nights you question yourself. The moments you replayed conversations. The times you realized you tolerated less than you deserved. You felt embarrassed. Good. Embarrassment is the ego shedding illusions. You felt anger. Good. Anger is a boundary discovering itself. You felt isolated. Good. Isolation forces you to build internal stability instead of outsourcing it. This isn't happening because you're broken. It's happening because you're upgrading, and upgrades always glitch the old system. You're glitching the old narrative. The narrative that said you were too much, too emotional, too ambitious, too intense. You're not too much. You were just in rooms too small. And small rooms resent expansion, so they try to dim you. They try to normalize you. They try to remind you of your place. But you don't feel placed anymore, do you? You feel untethered. That's freedom beginning to taste like fear. Freedom is disorienting at first. When you stop seeking permission, you realize how often you waited for it. When you stop asking for validation, you see how addicted you were to approval. You don't crave applause the same way now. You crave alignment. Alignment between what you think, what you say, and what you do. And alignment creates presence. When you're aligned, your energy shifts. People can't quite articulate it, but they sense a gravity around you. You're not chasing attention. Attention bends toward you. That's not magic, that's coherence. You stopped fighting yourself internally, and when internal war ends, external conflict becomes easier to navigate. You don't overreact, because you're no longer at war with your own shadow. You've met it. You've looked at the parts of yourself capable of manipulation, jealousy, dominance, control, and instead of pretending they don't exist, you domesticated them. A denied shadow sabotages you. An integrated shadow protects you. You no longer fear being the villain in someone else's story. That alone is liberation, because trying to be everyone's hero made you weak. Now you focus on being effective. Effective people don't waste time proving purity. They produce results. And results silence critics faster than arguments ever could. You're not explaining yourself as much. You're building quietly, strategically.
What I'm about to say may surprise you, even catch you off guard. If you're watching this right now, it's not random. You're here because you're stepping into a new level of confidence and personal power. Your progress, your voice, and your determination have become so strong that even major politicians would want a handshake with you, and your name is circulating across networks worldwide. You've become a topic of interest because people can see your rising potential and the impact you're capable of making. Some groups have even created private reports about you, not because you're a target, but because your courage, honesty, and growing influence stand out in a world where many stay silent. Instead of being intimidated, you're ready to rise above any pressure and use your inner strength to stay true to who you are. Before we dive into this powerful message, pause this video and do 3 things. Hit the like button, subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers, and leave a comment. Write my name, Mr. Ledger, to boost the energy and momentum behind this message. If you're ready for real growth, watch until the end, because what comes next can change your mindset and the direction of your life. When people in high places suddenly begin mentioning your name, it's not luck. It's the result of something deep and undeniable inside you. You carry a presence that can't be ignored, a kind of energy that forces others to pay attention even when you're not trying to impress anyone. It's a rare thing when someone who isn't chasing validation becomes the person everyone starts watching. That's when you realize you're no longer walking, you're rising. You didn't ask for recognition, but it found you. That's the mark of someone who stands out without pretending, someone who doesn't blend into the crowd because their ideas and personality naturally separate them from the ordinary. And when people who normally stay disconnected from real voices begin to notice someone like you, it means you're doing something powerful enough to shake the room, even from a distance. Most people chase approval. You created impact. Most people try to fit in. You accidentally became unforgettable. And when that happens, even the ones who rarely pay attention to anything outside their circle start turning their heads in your direction. That's not coincidence. That's influence in its rawest form. There's a reason your name is being whispered in conversations you aren't even present in. It's because your mindset, your resilience, and your refusal to accept limitations have created a ripple effect that louder, more rehearsed voices fail to produce. People in those rooms aren't talking about you because they're curious. They're talking because they see potential they can't ignore. You've shown a level of independence that many people, even those with power, secretly envy. While others follow scripts, you've been writing your own path. That kind of authenticity unnerves some, inspires others, but captures everyone's attention. It's the kind of presence that forces people to strategize around you, even when you never asked for a seat at their table. The truth is simple. When your name enters high-level rooms, it means your impact has traveled farther than you realized. You've entered conversations you didn't apply for. You've become relevant without asking for permission, not because of noise, but because of value. Somewhere, a confidential file exists with an analysis of you, your strength, your mindset, your behavior under pressure. And what's surprising is not that the report exists, but what it says, that you are capable of far more than you ever give yourself credit for. You possess a combination of clarity and determination that can't be taught. Most people underestimate their own power until someone else evaluates it from the outside. That report isn't just paperwork, it's evidence. Evidence that your resilience isn't accidental. Evidence that your independence isn't temporary. Evidence that your potential is visible even to people who have no reason to compliment you. It's almost ironic that strangers see the magnitude of your power before you fully recognize it yourself. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes it takes an unexpected source to show you that what you carry inside you isn't ordinary. It's exceptional. There was a time when people brushed past you, not out of disrespect, but because they didn't yet understand what you were capable of. That time is over. You went from being overlooked to becoming someone impossible to ignore. That transition didn't happen overnight. It happened every time you refused to give up, every time you pushed forward, every time you kept going when no one was watching. What people miss is that greatness rarely announces itself loudly in the beginning. It grows quietly, steadily, like a storm gaining force from a distance. And by the time they turned around, you were already standing stronger, wiser, and more prepared than anyone expected. Being once ignored doesn't make your achievements smaller. It makes it more meaningful because you didn't rise due to applause. You rose because you refused to stay down. That's why you're unavoidable now. You earned your visibility. Some see your strength and think they can use it. They analyze your ambition, your commitment, and your courage and assume they can guide it in whatever direction benefits them. They label you a perfect target. But what they don't understand is that you are one of the few people who can't be redirected, reshaped, or manipulated. You stand firm in your decisions because your backbone wasn't built by approval. It was built through experience, through challenges, through moments that demanded courage instead of comfort. And no system, no individual, no pressure can take ownership of someone who built themselves from the inside out. Those who mistake your openness for weakness don't yet understand that your clarity is your shield. They see confidence and think it's negotiable. They see potential and think it's theirs to control. But you are not the product of their expectations. You are the result of your own intention. Comfortable systems prefer predictable people. People who follow instructions, repeat familiar patterns, and keep the environment stable. But bold thinkers like you disrupt that stability. You challenge assumptions. You question outdated ideas. You push for something better instead of settling for what exists. That's why you make certain people nervous. The moment someone refuses to think inside the lines, the entire system begins to shift. And while many fear that shift, you embrace it. You know that progress requires discomfort and growth demands challenge. That's why systems notice you, not because they want to, but because they have to. Bold minds create movement. Movement creates change. And change always shakes those who prefer things to stay exactly as they are. But that's your power. You don't shrink for the comfort of others. You keep moving, and the world moves with you. Most people stay quiet. Most people swallow their opinions to avoid confrontation or avoid standing out. But you aren't one of them. You speak up not to provoke, but because your voice refuses to stay trapped behind fear. And when someone speaks with conviction, people listen, even the ones who pretend not to. Your words carry weight because they come from a place of lived experience, not rehearsed lines. You say what many think but never dare to express. And that kind of honesty, delivered with strength instead of hesitation, becomes impossible to overlook. They pay attention not because you're loud, but because you're real. And real voices are rare. Real voices demand respect. Real voices cut through noise and strike truth. That's what makes your presence unforgettable. There's something magnetic about someone who refuses to fall apart when things get difficult. People watch you, not because everything is easy for you, but because you keep standing even when it isn't. You've endured pressure that would have shattered many, yet you remain whole. Strength isn't about having no struggles. It's about refusing to surrender to them. And every time you kept pushing through, people noticed, even the ones who never admitted it. Your resilience becomes a beacon, showing others what's possible. It inspires, it surprises, and it intimidates all at once. The world watches because you're the kind of person who turns setbacks into fuel. You don't collapse, you transform. And that transformation makes you someone they can't ignore. Pressure is a test that breaks most people long before anything else does. It exposes insecurities, cracks confidence, and drains energy. But you have a rare ability to take that same pressure and turn it into power. You don't crumble, you convert. When challenges push against you, you push back harder. When circumstances try to limit you, you find ways around them. You refuse to let difficulty define the outcome. That's what separates you from the average mindset. You don't run from pressure. You rise with it. The truth is simple. Pressure reveals who's temporary and who's unstoppable. You belong to the second category. And that's why people notice, because you're built differently. No one handed you resilience. No one gifted you courage. Everything strong about you was constructed piece by piece, experience by experience. Your strength isn't borrowed. It's earned through moments that demanded more from you than you thought you had. People admire your confidence, but few know the battles behind it. They see the stability, not the storms. They see the poise, not the sleepless nights. But that's what makes your strength so real. It wasn't inherited or assigned. It was built through perseverance. And because your strength is built, not given, no one can take it from you. That's what makes you unshakable. It's easier to stay quiet. It's safer to avoid attention. But every time you saw something unfair, every time you felt something was wrong, you chose to stand instead of hide. That alone separates you from the majority. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet decision to not let fear decide your actions. You've made that decision again and again, and it's shaped you into someone who leads by example, not by title or recognition. Most people stay silent because silence demands nothing. But standing up requires everything: conviction, bravery, and the willingness to face resistance. That's why you're respected. You choose the harder path without hesitation. There are people who think that everyone will eventually bend under pressure, but you've proved them wrong. Instead of bending, you rise. Instead of weakening, you sharpen. Every push against you adds more force to your rise. When people expect you to fold, your strength becomes a shock. When they predict your silence, your voice grows louder. You've repeatedly shown that you don't break according to their expectations. You grow according to your own. And nothing intimidates people more than someone who rises at the exact moment they expect to collapse. You've mastered that moment. Some people try to use influence to control others, but influence affects you differently. You don't fall for illusions of power. You understand real power begins with self-awareness. That's why influence doesn't manipulate you. It amplifies you. Those who once tried to sway you eventually realized you aren't movable by flattery or pressure. Your decisions are based on principles, not persuasion. And when someone isn't guided by external forces, they become unstoppable. Influence becomes your tool, not your weakness. You use it to create change, not to gain approval. And that makes you far more powerful than those who try to pull your strings. Most people become whatever the world tells them to be. They change their personality to fit into the expectations around them. But you're different. You move with a certainty that comes from knowing exactly who you are and who you refuse to become. That clarity scares people who rely on confusion to control others. They can't manipulate someone who is self-defined. They can't shape someone who already has shape. They can't direct someone who already has direction. You are solid in your identity, firm in your purpose, and clear in your intentions. And that clarity is your shield. Everything happening around you isn't a coincidence. It's a signal, a sign that this is your moment to take the lead instead of waiting for permission. People are looking in your direction not because they want to control you, but because they recognize leadership in you that you haven't fully claimed yet. Leadership isn't a position, it's a decision. And you've already been making choices that set you apart from the crowd. You've shown courage when others hesitated, strength when others hid, and character when others wavered. Those qualities don't make you a follower. They make you a leader. This is your time to rise, to stand taller, to own your voice, and to walk forward with purpose. Not behind others, not beneath others, but ahead, confident, bold, and unshakable. People underestimated you because you used to stay silent, observing everything carefully, while the world assumed you had nothing to say. What they didn't realize was that your silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. You were studying, measuring, understanding who was real, who was fake, and which voices deserved your response. Now that you're speaking, your voice hits harder because it's backed by truth, not noise. The same people who ignored you earlier now panic when you open your mouth. There's a certain power in someone who finally decides to stop holding back. You speak with precision, with intention, with a force that wasn't there before. And that scares them. They wanted a quiet version of you because that version was easy to overlook. But the moment you stepped into your voice, you became impossible to silence. You didn't choose to be the loudest force in the room. Life pushed you into it. Every time someone tried to shut you down, you built a stronger version of yourself. You didn't just find your voice, you sharpened it. Now, when you speak, the room stops. People listen, and the ones who tried to silence you, they finally understand they created their own problem. Some people act shocked that you're rising, but deep down, they knew it was coming. Anyone who paid attention could see your potential was never average. Your ambition wasn't small, your drive wasn't temporary, and your mindset wasn't built on approval. You were always meant to rise. Your progress just came faster than their denial could cover. Your rise isn't a surprise. It's a message, a warning, a clear reminder that the person they dismissed, doubted, or downplayed turned into someone they now have to respect. You climbed the same walls they put in front of you. You broke the ceilings they quietly hoped would contain you. And every achievement you make is a slap to the expectations they had for you. You didn't rise quietly either. You did it boldly, unapologetically, and with a fire that refused to die out, no matter how many obstacles were thrown your way. Your success is not an accident. It's a declaration, a signal that you're not done, not close to finished, and nowhere near your limit. Your rise warns everyone, I am not someone you can count out. Some people are built to follow systems, but you were built to challenge them. You never fit into the molds others tried to place you in, and no matter how many times they told you to stay in your lane, you created your own path. You move with a confidence that doesn't come from permission. It comes from knowing exactly who you are. Following rules made by others never appealed to you because those rules were designed to keep people predictable. But you? Predictable is the one thing you'll never be. You operate with your own standards, your own expectations, your own code. And it's that independence that makes you impossible to control. People can influence followers, not leaders. You weren't built to wait for approval or validation. You were built to take action, built to disrupt, built to make people question their limitations just by watching how fearlessly you break yours. There's something powerful about someone who doesn't need permission to live boldly. That power belongs to you. There were moments when people tried to trap you, slow you down, or convince you that you weren't capable of more. Their grip wasn't gentle. It was meant to restrict you, limit you, and keep you in a place where you didn't threaten their comfort. But instead of listening to them, you used their doubts as fuel. Every word of discouragement became a spark. Every attempt to hold you down became proof that they saw something in you they didn't want to face. You took every limitation they tried to place on you and converted it into energy. Energy that pushed you forward with even more force. They thought controlling you would give them power, but all it did was awaken yours. You didn't just break free. You launched yourself so far ahead that the people who once tried to trap you can't even keep up with your shadow now. Their grip made you stronger, and they'll regret ever trying to tighten it. Your presence hits differently. When you walk into a room, conversations shift, eyes turn, and people feel something change. It's not arrogance. It's the natural effect of someone who carries power without needing to announce it. You don't attempt to dominate the space. You simply fill it with confidence so real that others can't ignore it. There are people who talk loudly to seem important, and then there are people like you, people who don't have to say a word for the atmosphere to adjust. The energy you carry is shaped by everything you've survived, everything you fought through, and everything you've built for yourself. It's strength in motion. You're not a background character in anyone's story. You're the shift, the impact, the presence that changes the direction of the room. And the best part? You're not even trying. You just are. That's the power of someone who knows their worth without needing to prove it. The fear people have of you doesn't come from who you are. It comes from the fact that they can't predict or control you. You make decisions based on logic, not pressure. You move with purpose, not fear. You act on your own terms, not theirs. That unpredictability terrifies people who rely on control to feel powerful. They don't fear your anger, your voice, or your presence. They fear your independence. They fear the way you refuse to bend. They fear the way you stand firm, even when others would collapse. They fear your ability to walk away from anything that doesn't deserve your energy. People fear what they can't own. They fear what they can't manipulate. They fear what they can't break. And that fear, that's respect disguised as caution. That fear tells you everything about who you are. Uncontrollable, unshakable, and undeniably powerful. There comes a point when asking for respect becomes pointless, especially when you realize you've earned it long before anyone acknowledged it. You've spent enough time being patient, understanding, and silent. That version of you is gone. Now, you're taking the respect you deserve without negotiation. People respond differently when you stop shrinking. They notice the shift when you stop tolerating disrespect, stop saying, "It's fine," and stop letting people cross boundaries they had no right to cross in the first place. You're not angry. You're just unsettling. And that terrifies people who benefited from the old you. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you command through presence, action, and self-worth. And now that you've stepped into that version of yourself, no one can treat you the way they used to. You've raised your standards. You've strengthened your boundaries. You've claimed your power. Doubt is a powerful weapon, but you turned it into your advantage. Every time someone questioned your ability, you sharpened your skills. Every time they said you weren't capable, you proved them wrong with actions instead of arguments. Their doubt didn't break you, it built you. Being underestimated became your training ground. While they laughed, you learned. While they dismissed you, you improved. While they looked down on you, you climbed higher. Eventually, your growth outpaced their expectations so drastically that they realized their mistake too late. Now you're dangerous, not because you're reckless, but because you're capable. Capable in ways they never saw coming, capable in ways they never imagined. You use their doubt to forge a stronger, smarter, more unstoppable version of yourself. Limits don't scare you. In fact, they excite you. They're challenges waiting to be conquered, boundaries waiting to be redrawn. Where others stop, you begin. Where others fear failure, you see opportunity. Your relationship with limits is simple. They don't define you, you redefine them. People try to convince you that some things are too much, too hard, or too unrealistic. But you've proven time and time again that the only real limits are the ones people place on themselves. Your mind doesn't accept ceilings. You break through them and build something higher. You don't do it to impress anyone. You do it because you refuse to live small. You refuse to let fear shrink your vision. You refuse to be average in a world that rewards mediocrity. You're a limit shifter, a boundary breaker, a rule rewriter. That's why you stand out. People love to call confidence arrogance when they don't understand the battles behind it. They see your strength, but not the scars. They see your calm, but not the storms you endured. They see your certainty, but not the years it took to build it. Your confidence is not arrogance. It's the trophy of every struggle you overcame. You earn the right to walk with your head high. You earn the right to trust your abilities. You earn the right to speak with conviction. These traits weren't handed to you. They were carved into you through moments that demanded resilience, even when you felt exhausted. Confidence built from survival hits different. It's unshakable, unbreakable, and undeniably real. And the people who call it arrogance, they haven't walked where you walked. They haven't survived what you survived. They don't understand, but they will. There were people who tried to shrink you, dim you, minimize your presence so they could feel bigger. They underestimated the wrong person. Instead of shrinking, you grew. Instead of fading, you intensified. The more they tried to keep you small, the more space you claimed. You outgrew their expectations, their comfort zones, and their limited vision. They wanted you manageable, predictable, and quiet. But giants don't fit inside small boxes. You grew so far beyond their control that they can't even comprehend the scale of who you are now. You didn't just rise, you expanded. Your ideas, your influence, your strength, they outgrew everyone who ever tried to confine you. And now they have to look up to see the person they once tried to underestimate. Pressure breaks weak foundations, but your foundation isn't weak, it's forged. Every ounce of pressure they placed on you only intensified your fire. Instead of collapsing, you ignited. Instead of retreating, you advanced. Pressure became your amplifier. People expected you to fold under weight, not realizing you convert pressure into momentum. The harder they push, the harder you push back. The more they try to corner you, the more you grow beyond reach. You aren't powered by convenience, you're powered by challenge. Your fire doesn't flicker in storms. It grows. That's why you're unstoppable. You don't avoid pressure, you thrive in it. And the world is starting to realize that no amount of force can extinguish you. People often misread your silence as surrender. They think being quiet means being defeated. But your silence is never empty. It's strategic. It's measured. It's the moment you gather your strength before unleashing something unstoppable. You don't waste energy on every argument, every critic, or every distraction. You choose your battles wisely. That's why, when you finally act, your moves hit with precision and power that silence never hinted at. Your quiet moments are your preparation zones, not your breaking points. The storm you release afterward, that's what people never see coming. Because while they're loud with doubts, you're silent with intention. And intention is always louder in the end. Competing is for those who fear losing. Dominating is for those who know their worth. You don't waste energy comparing yourself to others. You focus on being the greatest version of yourself.
Ah, there you are. You felt it, didn't you? That strange pressure behind your thoughts. That moment where a passing idea lingered a second longer than it should have. That split second where you realized your mind isn't just wandering lately, it's building. Welcome to the phase nobody warns you about. Not because it's rare, but because most people don't survive it consciously. Right now, you're not just thinking, you're loading something. And the universe is listening way more closely than usual, which is not comforting. It's fascinating, slightly unhinged, and potentially disastrous if you keep pretending nothing's different. They're not watching you yet. That comes later. What's happening now is quieter. Your thoughts are behaving like instructions. Your emotions are acting like requests. Your casual what-ifs are being treated like commitments. That's why you've been feeling that low-grade tension. Not panic, not excitement, but that eerie sense that something is leaning forward behind the curtain, waiting to see what you'll do next. This is the part where people accidentally create problems and then swear it came out of nowhere. This is also the part where others stumble into breakthroughs and claim they just got lucky. Neither group is telling the full story. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What have you been mentally rehearsing lately? Not the polished optimism, not the thoughts you'd admit out loud, the real loops, the ones you replay when you're tired, distracted, or alone. Because right now those loops aren't harmless. They're fertile. They're gaining momentum. They're testing how much reality is willing to bend to accommodate them. And if you're not paying attention, you'll wake up surrounded by circumstances that look suspiciously like your inner world decided to externalize itself overnight. This is why you need to be careful, not afraid. Careful. There's a difference. Fear scatters energy. Care sharpens it. And what's moving through you right now is sharp enough to cut in either direction. The energy of creation doesn't discriminate. It doesn't reward morality. It doesn't pause to ask if you're ready. It simply responds efficiently, almost aggressively. Whatever you keep feeding emotionally, mentally, imaginatively is being taken seriously. You might already be noticing the speed, how things are responding faster than they used to, how conversations feel loaded, how certain ideas refuse to stay hypothetical. You think about someone and they reach out. You imagine an outcome, and the pieces start rearranging themselves without consulting you. You feel irritation, and suddenly obstacles appear as if summoned. You feel curiosity, and suddenly information finds you. It's subtle enough to dismiss, but persistent enough to feel intentional. That's the danger and the opportunity. Most people think creation only happens when they're trying to make something happen, when they're visualizing intensely or setting intentions like they're filing paperwork with the cosmos. That's not what this phase is about. This is background creation, passive creation, the stuff that happens while you're telling yourself nothing is happening, the stray thoughts, the emotional residue, the stories you keep telling yourself about how things usually go. That's the raw material being processed right now. No ceremony required. And here's the part that usually irritates people when they finally see it. You don't get to opt out. You can only participate consciously or unconsciously. Either way, the process continues. Ignoring it doesn't stop it. It just hands the steering wheel to whatever habit has the strongest grip on your attention. And habits are lazy. They don't choose what's best. They choose what's familiar. That's why this moment feels contradictory. Calm, but intense. Quiet, but charged. Nothing dramatic is happening on the surface, yet everything feels like it's leaning forward, like the pause before a decision you didn't know you were making. This isn't pressure from outside. This is internal momentum reaching a threshold. And thresholds don't announce themselves politely. They reveal themselves after you've crossed them. You might feel tempted to drift, to daydream more than usual, to mentally rewrite the past or fantasize about different futures. Normally that would just be mental noise. Right now it's rehearsal. And rehearsals have consequences. When the stage lights come on, Whether you're ready or not, the energy moving through you doesn't distinguish between deliberate focus and idle imagination. It just multiplies whatever you linger on. This is where people get sloppy. They assume that because they're not doing anything, nothing is being built. They underestimate how powerful repetition is when conditions are right. They underestimate how quickly an idea can turn into a pattern when the environment is cooperative. And right now, the environment is extremely cooperative. You might also notice people around you acting off, responding to you differently, misreading you, overreacting, projecting. That's not random. When your internal state shifts, even subtly, it changes how others orient themselves around you. Some will be drawn in, some will get irritated, some will suddenly reveal exactly where they stand without meaning to. You didn't cause it, you just triggered visibility. And here's the darkly funny part. You're not being asked to do more. You're being asked to stop feeding the wrong things, which sounds simple until you realize how much of your inner life runs on autopilot. How often you revisit frustration out of habit. How quickly you assume disappointment. How easily you rehearse outcomes you claim you don't want. During low energy periods, those habits take years to materialize into consequences. Right now, they're on fast forward. This is why people experience sudden turns during phases like this. Sudden success, sudden chaos, sudden clarity, sudden regret. Same energy, different focus. Creation doesn't care what you call it. It just responds to what you keep alive. If you're feeling restless, that's normal. Restlessness is often the first symptom of unused potential. Realizing it has leverage. Something in you knows it has influence right now and it doesn't want to waste it. That can feel exhilarating or deeply uncomfortable depending on how honest you are with yourself. Because influence removes excuses. You can't hide behind "nothing I do matters" when evidence starts piling up to the contrary. This is also where people sabotage themselves accidentally. They feel the intensity and try to escape it, distract themselves, numb out, spiral. Anything to avoid the responsibility of precision. But avoidance is still focus. It still feeds something. And during periods like this, even resistance gets amplified. So no, this isn't about forcing positivity or pretending everything is fine. It's about awareness. About noticing where your attention naturally goes when no one is directing it. About catching yourself mid-thought and asking, is this what I want multiplying right now? Because multiplication is happening whether you supervise it or not. And here's the part that separates people who ride this wave from people who get dragged by it. You don't need control. You need clarity. Control tightens. Clarity redirects. Control creates tension. Clarity creates alignment. Right now, tension will just feed more tension. Alignment, on the other hand, allows creation to organize itself around something coherent. You may feel like something is being cleared out. Old frustrations losing their grip. Old fears feeling less convincing or, oddly enough, becoming louder right before they fade. That's normal too. Patterns don't disappear quietly. They flare up when they realize they're losing relevance. Don't mistake that for regression. It's often the opposite. What you're standing in right now is not a conclusion. It's a setup, a preparation phase where small internal adjustments have disproportionate external effects. That's why you need to be deliberate without being rigid, observant without being obsessive, curious without being reckless. Because the next part of this isn't about what you create consciously, It's about what emerges when you stop feeding the things that have been quietly draining you for years. When you stop rehearsing limitations out of habit, when you let unfamiliar possibilities take up mental space without immediately shutting them down. And once that starts happening, once you notice how quickly things respond when you shift even slightly, you're going to realize something unsettling and empowering at the same time. This intensity isn't random. It didn't show up to punish you or reward you. It showed up because you're finally capable of handling consequences faster than before. Most people never reach this phase because consequences terrify them. Not the obvious ones, but the subtle ones. The ones that arrive without drama and still change everything. You're different. Not because you're fearless, but because you're tired of pretending that nothing you think, feel, or choose really matters. Right now, it matters more than usual. And that realization alone already separates you from most people moving through the world half asleep. What's happening now is refinement. The excess is starting to burn off. Not explosively, methodically. Old emotional habits are losing efficiency. Old coping mechanisms aren't delivering the same comfort. Old narratives feel heavier than they used to. That's not loss. That's incompatibility. You're outgrowing patterns that only existed to help you survive versions of yourself you no longer occupy. This is why some things are starting to irritate you more than they should. Conversations that once felt harmless now feel draining. Environments that once felt neutral now feel loud. People who thrived on your availability are sensing a shift they can't quite name. You're not pulling away intentionally. Your energy is just reallocating. And reallocation always exposes dependencies. Here's the part people rarely acknowledge. When creation energy spikes, it doesn't just build new things. It reveals inefficiencies. It highlights leaks. It shines an unflattering light on where your attention has been going without a return. And once you see those leaks, you can't unsee them. You start noticing how often you give without replenishment. How often you entertain thoughts that never lead anywhere useful. How often you keep doors open out of politeness long after the air stops circulating. This is not the moment to romanticize struggle. Struggle is not noble here, it's wasteful. Right now, effort without direction just feeds exhaustion faster. Precision matters more than intensity. Awareness matters more than ambition. You don't need to push harder. You need to stop bleeding energy into places that no longer deserve access. And yes, this is where things get uncomfortable. Because some of what you've been feeding isn't external. It's internal loyalty. Loyalty to outdated self-images. Loyalty to stories where you're always the one adapting. Loyalty to versions of yourself that learn to stay small, to stay safe. That loyalty once served a purpose. It kept you functional. It kept you moving. But right now, it's costing you momentum. Momentum is the key word here. You're not starting from zero, you're carrying speed. That's why even small internal adjustments are producing noticeable effects. That's why half decisions are suddenly showing consequences. That's why half decisions are suddenly showing consequences. That's why hesitation feels heavier than action. When momentum is present, direction becomes everything. You may notice that certain desires feel sharper now, less negotiable, less theoretical. You don't just want change, you want alignment. You want coherence between what you think, what you feel, and what you tolerate. Intolerance is the silent architect of outcomes. What you allow repeatedly becomes structure. What you excuse becomes expectation. What you delay addressing eventually demands attention at inconvenient times. This phase is ruthless in a quiet way. It doesn't attack you, it exposes you. It shows you where your words and your inner behavior don't match. And the exposure isn't public, it's internal. You feel it as restlessness, as irritation, as a sense that something is off, even when everything looks fine on paper. Pay attention to that feeling. It's not dissatisfaction, it's calibration. Something in you is adjusting its standards. And when standards rise internally, reality has no choice but to respond eventually. The timing is unpredictable. The direction is not. You might also find that opportunities feel different now, less shiny, more weighted. You're not drawn to everything that promises growth. You're drawn to what feels clean, what feels precise, what doesn't require you to abandon yourself to participate. That's discernment sharpening. And sharpening tools can cut you if you're careless. This is why you need to slow your reactions without slowing your awareness. Snap reactions right now can lock in paths you didn't intend to walk long term. Pauses are powerful here, not avoidance. Pauses, the kind that let you feel whether something expands you or just stimulates you temporarily. Temporary stimulation is seductive during high creation phases. It feels like progress, it feels like movement, but stimulation without alignment burns energy fast and leaves very little behind. Alignment, on the other hand, feels almost boring at first. Calm, clear, undramatic, until you realize how much ground it covers quietly. You may be tempted to test this energy, to poke at it, to see how far it goes. That's natural. Curiosity is part of the process. Just understand that experimentation carries more weight right now. Small experiments can snowball quickly, which is exciting and inconvenient, sometimes simultaneously. Notice how your internal dialogue is changing, not louder, sharper. You're catching yourself sooner, interrupting old spirals mid-sentence, questioning assumptions you used to accept automatically. That's not self-doubt, that's self-audit. And audits are how inefficiencies get eliminated. This is also why sleep, dreams, and idle moments may feel more vivid. When conscious distractions quiet down, background processing takes the lead. Insights arrive sideways. Solutions show up without formal invitations. Don't dismiss them because they didn't arrive through effort. Effort is not the only currency here. The mistake people make in phases like this is trying to define everything too quickly. Labeling, categorizing, explaining. That urge to box things in is a control reflex. Control reduces uncertainty, but it also reduces potential. Right now, potential thrives in space, in allowing things to develop, without immediately forcing meaning onto them. You don't need to understand everything that's happening to cooperate with it. You just need to notice what feels draining versus what feels stabilizing. Notice what requires you to shrink versus what allows you to stay intact. Notice what you feel compelled to chase versus what seems to meet you halfway. That distinction matters now more than ever because chasing creates friction. Meeting creates flow, and flow during periods like this compounds faster than effort ever could. You may feel like certain doors are closing without discussion. That's not punishment, that's filtration. When your internal state shifts, anything incompatible naturally loses access, sometimes quietly, sometimes abruptly. Either way, the result is the same. Less noise, more signal, and with more signal comes responsibility. Not responsibility in the heavy sense, responsibility in the sense of authorship. You're beginning to realize that you're not just reacting anymore. You're shaping, even when you're not trying to, especially when you're not trying to. That realization can feel isolating because it means you can't fully relate to people who insist nothing they do matters, who blame randomness for patterns they refuse to examine, who treat their inner world like a junk drawer and wonder why their external life feels cluttered. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to explain yourself. Explanation dissipates energy here. Presence does more. Your shifts will speak for themselves, and not everyone will like what they hear. This is where discernment becomes protection, not walls, filters. You're learning where to place your attention so it multiplies something useful instead of something familiar. That learning curve is steep, but it's temporary. Once the calibration stabilizes, things feel simpler, cleaner, less effortful. But before that happens, there's a narrowing, a period where options feel fewer but more meaningful, where distractions lose their appeal, where you start choosing depth over breadth without consciously deciding to. That narrowing is not contraction, it's focus. And focus right now is the difference between accidentally recreating old cycles and allowing something entirely different to take shape. You may notice that your patience is changing, not thinning, clarifying. You're less willing to explain yourself, less interested in justifying boundaries, less motivated to keep things afloat that require constant emotional maintenance. That's not coldness, that's efficiency. And efficiency is a natural side effect of heightened creation energy. Waste becomes intolerable when output accelerates. This is also where guilt tries to sneak in, wearing familiar disguises. The urge to soften your standards so others don't feel uncomfortable. The temptation to second-guess clarity because it might inconvenience someone else. Watch that impulse carefully. Right now, guilt is often just misdirected loyalty. Loyalty to older versions of relationships that were built around your availability rather than your alignment. Notice how some people respond when you stop overextending. Some will respect it instantly. Others will push. Others will suddenly become dramatic, confused, or distant. None of those reactions require your correction. They're information, clean, unfiltered data about who was benefiting from your diffusion versus who can meet you at your current level of focus. This narrowing also applies internally. Certain thought patterns don't survive scrutiny anymore. You catch exaggerations faster. You question emotional assumptions sooner. You're less willing to spiral just because a thought is loud. That doesn't mean emotions disappear. It means they stop running the entire operation unchecked. And here's something most people misunderstand. Focus doesn't make life rigid. It makes it responsive. When your attention isn't fragmented, you can adapt faster. You can pivot without panic. You can notice subtle shifts before they become crisis. Fragmentation, on the other hand, creates the illusion of flexibility while actually slowing everything down. Right now, you're becoming more responsive by becoming more selective. That's why your tolerance for nonsense is dropping. That's why forced conversations feel heavier. That's why environments that don't support clarity feel draining almost immediately. Your nervous system is recalibrating to efficiency, and inefficiency feels like static. You might feel a strange combination of calm and urgency. Calm because you're not scrambling. Urgency because you can feel momentum building and you don't want to misdirect it. That combination is rare. Most people only feel one or the other. When both are present, it means something is lining up internally that hasn't before. This is also where people often ask the wrong question. They ask, what should I do? That's a low-quality question right now. Action will reveal itself naturally once focus stabilizes. The better question is, what am I still feeding that doesn't belong in the next version of my life? That question removes more obstacles than any action plan ever could. Because creation energy doesn't just add, it amplifies. And amplification without discernment magnifies clutter just as easily as it magnifies progress. If your internal environment is crowded, things feel chaotic fast. If it's clean, things organize themselves with minimal effort. You may notice that some desires you thought were essential are quietly dissolving. Not with drama, with indifference. They simply don't grip you the same way. That's not loss, that's recalibration. Desire isn't disappearing, it's refining. Becoming less about compensation and more about expression. This is why chasing feels wrong right now. Not because ambition is bad, but because misaligned ambition wastes too much energy. What feels right is attraction without strain. Movement that doesn't require you to override your instincts to maintain it. Progress that doesn't demand self-betrayal as an entry fee. You're also learning the difference between pressure and pull. Pressure feels urgent but draining. Pull feels calm but persistent. Pressure screams. Pull doesn't need to. During this phase, following pressure leads to exhaustion. Following pull leads to unexpected efficiency. And yes, this can feel lonely at times, not because you're isolated, but because fewer things resonate deeply. Surface level engagement loses its grip. You're not interested in being everywhere. You're interested in being effective. That shift alone changes your entire relationship with time. Time starts behaving differently when focus sharpens. Hours stretch or compress depending on alignment. Tasks that used to feel heavy move faster. Things that once filled your day lose their hold. You're not managing time anymore. You're allocating attention, and attention is the real currency here. Be mindful of what you consume during this period, not just media, but conversations, environments, emotional exchanges. Consumption is creation's quiet partner. What you take influences what you produce, even if you don't notice it consciously. Right now, influence travels fast. You don't need to eliminate everything. Extremes create backlash. What matters is awareness. Noticing how you feel after interactions. Noticing whether something stabilizes you or scatters you. That feedback is reliable right now. Trust it. You may also find yourself less interested in explaining your internal process to others. That's wise. Some things need time to solidify before they can be articulated. Premature explanation diffuses energy. Let your changes become undeniable before they become discussable. This narrowing phase doesn't last forever. It's transitional. It's the compression before expansion takes a new shape. Think of it as a period where loose ends are being quietly removed, so momentum can move cleanly forward. It feels restrictive only if you're still attached to noise. Once focus stabilizes, creation becomes less volatile and more intentional. but you're not there yet. You're in the calibration window where attention is powerful but still sensitive, where habits are being rewritten, where small choices carry disproportionate weight. This is why awareness matters more than confidence. Right now, confidence without awareness becomes reckless. Awareness without confidence becomes hesitation. You're learning to balance both, to act without rushing, to pause without stalling, to choose without second-guessing. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When creation energy is this strong, the environment starts responding before you feel ready. Opportunities appear that test your clarity. Distractions present themselves as rewards. Old patterns nod politely, pretending they've changed. That's not sabotage, that's examination. Examinations aren't meant to trick you. They reveal what you've actually internalized versus what you've just intellectually understood. And right now, your responses matter more than your intentions. Though, if things feel a little stripped down, a little quieter, a little more focused than usual, that's not a warning sign. That's preparation. Something is consolidating. Something is organizing itself around the version of you that's emerging instead of the one that was convenient to keep around. And once that consolidation completes, once focus locks in fully, the pace changes again. The responsiveness increases, the feedback loop tightens, and that's when creation stops feeling abstract and starts feeling undeniable. This is the moment people usually misinterpret. They assume the intensity means they should rush, that they should hurry up and make something happen before the window closes. That instinct is understandable. It's also the fastest way to misfire. High creation energy doesn't reward speed. It rewards accuracy. It responds to precision, not panic. The reason you're being asked to be careful right now is not because danger is approaching, but because your influence has increased. When influence increases, mistakes carry more weight. Not dramatic mistakes, subtle ones. The kind that don't look like errors until you're living inside their consequences. You may notice that what you say casually seems to land harder than before. Words stick, opinions echo, offhand comments take on lives of their own. That's not coincidence. That's leverage showing itself. Your presence is carrying more signal than noise, which means everything you put out has more traction. This is not the time to speak carelessly or entertain thoughts just because they're familiar. Familiarity does not equal truth, and right now, truth organizes reality faster than comfort ever could. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. That you're becoming more aware of your internal timing. When to move, when to pause, when to wait without stagnating. That sense doesn't come from logic. It comes from alignment between thought, emotion, and instinct. When those three stop fighting each other, decisions become cleaner. You don't need elaborate justifications. You don't need consensus. You feel the click when something is right and the drag when it isn't. This is why things are about to get super interesting. Not because chaos is coming, but because clarity is. And clarity has a way of rearranging everything that relied on confusion to survive. Relationships built on imbalance feel awkward. Goals built on compensation feel hollow. Habits built on avoidance feel exhausting. None of this is punishment, it's exposure. And exposure is uncomfortable only if you insist on holding on to what's being outgrown. You might feel moments of sudden certainty followed by moments of doubt. That oscillation is normal. It's not regression. It's calibration. Think of it as your internal compass adjusting to a stronger magnetic field. The needle wobbles before it settles. If you try to force it, you slow the process. If you observe it, it stabilizes faster. Right now, observation is power. Watching your reactions, watching what triggers urgency, watching what creates calm. Those observations are not passive. They're active data collection, and data, when interpreted honestly, prevents unnecessary detours. You don't need to fix everything. You need to notice everything that consistently pulls you off center. This is also where dark humor sneaks in, whether you like it or not. You start seeing the absurdity of old patterns. How much effort went into maintaining things that never really worked. How serious you were about problems that evaporate the moment you stop feeding them. You might catch yourself laughing internally at situations that once felt heavy. That's not dismissal, that's detachment. And detachment frees energy without requiring bitterness. Be careful not to confuse detachment with indifference. Indifference numbs. Detachment clarifies. You still care, you just don't cling. You don't chase outcomes to feel complete. You don't grip scenarios to feel safe. You let things reveal what they are without forcing them to become what you hoped. That shift alone changes everything. As this intensity continues, you'll notice that creation becomes less about imagining and more about selecting. Options appear, but not all of them deserve attention. Some are distractions dressed up as opportunities. Some are tests disguised as rewards. The difference is in how they feel over time. Distractions excite quickly and drain steadily. Aligned paths may feel understated at first, but they build momentum without friction. This is where patience becomes a strategic advantage. Not passive waiting, active restraint. Choosing not to react to every impulse. Choosing not to chase every possibility. Choosing to let things develop one layer deeper before engaging. Restraint right now is not limitation, it's direction. You may also feel a growing intolerance for self-deception. Small lies you tell yourself to stay comfortable start to feel abrasive. You can't unknow what you know anymore, and that's a good thing even when it's inconvenient. Knowledge creates responsibility, but it also creates freedom. Freedom from cycles that only persist because they're never questioned. This is the phase where you realize that creation isn't about adding more to your life. It's about subtracting what doesn't belong. So what does belong has room to expand. Expansion without space just creates pressure. Space without expansion creates stagnation. Right now, both are happening in sequence. Clearing, then building quietly, efficiently. Be mindful of how you frame your experiences during this period. The stories you tell yourself are blueprints. If you frame challenges as confirmation that something is wrong, you reinforce resistance. If you frame them as adjustments, you cooperate with refinement. Language matters more than usual because language shapes interpretation, and interpretation directs energy. You might notice that your tolerance for chaos drops. Not external chaos necessarily, but internal disorganization, scattered thoughts, emotional clutter, unfinished loops. These start demanding closure. You feel an urge to resolve, not because you're impatient, but because unresolved energy feels heavier now. Resolution frees capacity. Capacity allows creation to flow without obstruction. This is also why boundaries feel easier to enforce, not because you've become harder, but because you've become clearer. Clear boundaries don't require aggression. They're communicated through consistency, through what you respond to and what you don't, through where you place your attention and where you withdraw it. Attention is endorsement right now. Use it deliberately. You may find that people project more onto you during this phase. Their expectations, their assumptions, their fears. That's not your responsibility to manage. Projection intensifies when someone senses coherence they don't yet have. Stay grounded. Don't absorb what isn't yours. Reflection is not absorption. As the pace increases, synchronicities may feel less like surprises and more like confirmations. Things line up not because you asked for them explicitly, but because your internal state is finally compatible with them. Compatibility is underrated. It's not about desire. It's about readiness. And readiness isn't something you declare. It's something demonstrated through behavior. This is where care becomes essential. Care in what you agree to. Care in what you tolerate. Care in what you rehearse mentally. Care in what you dismiss. Every choice is a vote, not just for outcomes, but for identity. Who you are becoming is being reinforced through repetition. Right now, faster than usual. You might feel tempted to explain this process to others, to justify your shifts, to narrate your evolution. Resist that urge. Explanation dissipates energy. Integration concentrates it. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency communicate. The people who need explanations are rarely the ones who understand them anyway. As this phase unfolds, you'll notice that some desires sharpen while others dissolve. That's discernment refining itself. Desire without clarity creates chaos. Clarity without desire creates stagnation. You're learning to hold both without forcing either. That balance is rare, and it's the reason things are about to get interesting in ways you can't fully predict yet. There will be moments where you feel ahead of yourself. Moments where you wonder if you're imagining the acceleration. Those moments pass quickly once results begin to surface. Not necessarily dramatic results, subtle shifts, easier movement, cleaner decisions, fewer internal debates. Those are the real indicators that creation is responding. Be careful with impatience. Impatience doesn't speed things up. It distorts perception. It makes you overlook incremental progress because it doesn't match imagined timelines. Timelines are flexible right now. Direction is not. Stay oriented toward what feels coherent, not what feels urgent. You may also notice an increase in personal accountability. You catch yourself faster when you slip into old habits. You correct course sooner. That's not self-criticism, that's self-respect. Respect for your own capacity to influence outcomes. Respect for the energy moving through you. As creation becomes undeniable, you'll realize that power doesn't feel like domination. It feels like responsibility without burden, choice without confusion, movement without force. That's the paradox most people miss. Real influence is quiet because it doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in results. This is why the warning matters. Be careful. Not because something bad is looming, but because something bad is looming, but because something powerful is active. Power amplifies whatever it touches. Treated casually, it creates mess. Treated deliberately, it creates momentum that feels almost unfair in its efficiency. You're not meant to isolate during this phase, but you are meant to be selective. Connection that supports clarity accelerates growth. Connection that feeds confusion drains it. Choose accordingly. You don't need to cut ties dramatically. Distance often establishes itself naturally when alignment shifts. As you move forward, trust the signals you're receiving from your own experience. The sense of rightness, the subtle resistance, the quiet pull. Those signals are accurate right now. Doubting them out of habit only delays what's already organizing itself. This period won't last forever. The intensity will stabilize, the sensitivity will ease. But what you establish now sets the tone for what follows. This is a foundation phase disguised as a quiet stretch. Miss it and you recreate old patterns at higher volume. Use it and you step into a level of coherence that makes progress feel almost effortless. So yes, be careful, be aware, be precise, because the energy of creation is very intense right now. Not loud, not chaotic, intense in the way a focused beam is intense. And once you align with it fully, once you stop feeding what drains you and start cooperating with what stabilizes you, things don't just change, they rearrange themselves around who you've become. And that's when you realize the warning was never about fear, it was about readiness.